So we have with us today the GH5S. I'm going to be looking at it, scrutinizing it, poking it, getting into the insides and dissecting it. Hi everybody, I'm here again today with my GH5S. I've had it for just a little while now, and I'm just going to go over a few little features that I've found are really cool on it, and some things you may or may not know about, and just go over some of the general things. Some of the first things about it are that it has an oversized 10.2 megapixel sensor. It's actually a 12.5 megapixel sensor, but 10.2 is what is actually used for the video. And it shoots video natively at any format. So if you're shooting 4:3, it'll take up the whole sensor to shoot that 4:3. It doesn't crop in to get 4:3. Same with 4K, Cinema 4K, whatever resolution you might think of, it shoots it all on this puppy in natively. If you have anything to add, why don't you leave your comment down below, where I can look at it, scrutinize it, dissect it, and all those other things I mentioned. And one of the first great things I notice about this camera is the consistency between their other cameras. The body styles, the function buttons, the menus, they're all very similar and feel very familiar, even to other cameras, I find. So I find that it's very easy to use right out of the box. You don't feel like you're picking up some kind of strange alien technology and having to decipher all these clues to figure it out. It's pretty simple to get around and to just turn it on right out of the box and get a half decent picture without really much setup. And that's something I really enjoy. All the buttons, dials, and everything have a certain look and consistency to them as well. That helps you feel like you've done this before and just gives you that general ease overall of picking it up and not being afraid to shoot for the first time. I think the menus on these cameras are pretty much all identical no matter what camera you're using. It's just certain features may be grayed out that aren't available on your camera. So if you've ever used a G85 or a G9 or a GH5, you'll be fine with the GH5S. And I've even seen the menus on the S1H, and they're very similar too. And they have a lot of the same screens and same functionality, things that you're very used to, same terminology and language. I really appreciate that about Panasonic. I also love how they update the firmware quite often, and will update firmware to cameras that were even more expensive than the one that you originally bought. I think that's a really great feature that Panasonic has. It's not so much a feature, but part of their commitment to their customers. And this is the world's first Cinema 4K that does 60 frames per second. Cinema 4K is actually a larger format, slightly, than regular ultra high definition. 4096 by 2160 is Cinema 4K. Another thing about this camera that you'll find is really cool is that the sensor is twice as sensitive as most other micro four thirds sensors. And sure, you don't get the same resolution. This sensor is twice as sensitive and will pick up twice the amount of light as a regular micro four thirds camera. Depending on the camera we're talking about, it could be even more than that. And it's also an oversized sensor, and it has a 1.8 times crop, where the GH5 has a 2 times crop compared to full frame sensors. And the GH5S also has a neat little timecode jammer that you can plug into your flash port right here. And that allows you to sync up multiple cameras and get virtually perfect sync. It's a little bit off. I don't think the technology is perfect. And from what I've seen on all the other reviews and from the reading I've done is you're generally off about 4 frames from the just like and subscribe and everything will go great. And honestly, I just always link up things using the sound wave files myself, and I've never really had much of an issue, but that can generally help multiple camera systems very well if you can sync them all up. Such an excellent feature to include on such an inexpensive camera. These cameras have such great features for filmmakers, it's almost insane compared to other cameras. Just like and subscribe and everything will go great. So one of the last great features I've noticed about the GH5S is its dual ISO. And the dual ISO gives you 2 independent circuits for different ISO. The first native ISO is 400, and the native ISO is the ISO at which you can capture an image. Imaging sensor or computer inside will convert it to an electronic signal without any amplification. So as soon as you add the ISO higher than 400 on this camera, then you're going to start amplifying the signal slightly. But there is a second ISO that starts off at 2500 fresh with no gain, and then you apply gain from there. And another thing to consider about the GH5S is that its ISO at 6400 will look a lot cleaner than the GH5s. And since it allows in twice as much light, you get almost 2 full stops more. And one of the last great things, I think, is the autofocus. A lot of people like to poo-poo on Panasonic's autofocus. I don't know, but maybe the last firmware that was updated into my camera before I purchased it, there was a little note inside saying that they upgraded the firmware. And I've noticed that the autofocus is actually pretty good. I don't find that it goes in and out of focus too much, or hunting, or that back and forth thing until it finds it. So far, it seems pretty good. I'm gonna have to do more extensive testing, and I'm gonna make a video on that probably in about a month, because I really wanna thoroughly test that out. But not only that, also see if other firmware updates might be out that I could download, because there very well could be another firmware update by now. And that's another thing too. It is fairly easy to update the firmware, and Panasonic, like I mentioned earlier, is really good about updating their firmware and giving you features and improving their features and doing things that people suggest. So that's a really great investment in these cameras when you know that they're going to be working on it for the future and it's not just going to turn into some obsolete brick. And lastly, one thing I really didn't like, one thing that it doesn't really bug me that much, but I noticed that a lot of people were complaining about it. Actually, it's not the last thing because I just remembered another thing, but a lot of people were complaining about the display button right here on the back, and how on the GH5 it actually sticks out a little more, and it's actually easy to hit it with your thumb and accidentally change your display screen on your LCD. And so this one's a little more recessed, and it is flush with the body. And I didn't think that would be a big problem. Other reviewers, I don't know, didn't seem to be much of an issue, but I'm finding they're correct. It is easy to hit it still. And it's a little annoying when you're trying to do something and all of a sudden you hit the button and it changes to the black screen or something like that, or that there's another screen. Actually, I love this screen. It's full of information. It lets you do touch screen operations to just really quickly check your white balance and all that stuff. And it's a really great screen, but you don't want it popping up just out of nowhere. But you can turn off that display button in the menu, so that's not too bad. I personally kind of like having a lot of those options available, so I just try hard not to hit it. But not only that, I'll be using this on a gimbal or a tripod, which brings me to my last point. There's no IBIS. So if you don't have any image stabilization on your lens, then you may not want this camera, because this is not for run and gun shooting really, unless you're some kind of Superman that can hold this super steady without any micro vibrations, which is highly unlikely. Seriously doubt it. It's hard to think of things that I don't like about this camera. I really like the pictures. People said that, well, you know, this is a video camera. This is a video-centric camera. This is not a hybrid camera. A lot of their other cameras are hybrid cameras, like the G9, the G85, the GH5. They're all like, you know, they all have great video capability. Even the G9 has been upgraded its firmware for great video capability. Awesome IBIS. I think the GH5 has the best version. So it's kind of sad they didn't include the IBIS for this version, but there's a good reason for it. It's because of, in film, people like to actually control the image a little bit more, and with image stabilization, you can actually get a weird little wobble, or it takes a second. When you turn the camera like a little, it'll take a second for the image to shift. It'll like kind of hold on and then shift, because it's trying to compensate for any camera movement. So if you're in like a high-speed car chase, you don't want all those like, you know what I mean, any strange little fluctuations in the image, that if you plan on using your image for a Hollywood movie or something for Netflix or something where they're going to be a little more picky, then you want that kind of image control. You don't want IBIS. So for those of you complaining about IBIS, you should probably get one of the other cameras. So that's about all I have to say about the GH5S right now. If you have anything to add, if you've noticed anything cool or weird or something you don't like about it, or if you just don't like this video at all, or you have all kinds of critical pointers for me to, you know, to get down and do better and something, I don't know, leave that down below where I can look at it and ignore it. So get back to me or not, and subscribe and like it or not, and then goodbye. Just like, subscribe, that's all the medication you need. Thanks a lot. Come back again and watch my videos, damn you. Maybe not the damn you part, sorry.